Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone, and it's caught! Jelani Woods! Touchdown! INDY! A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton!
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it up, got it! Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn Emmy winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hey, everybody, welcome aboard Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday, November number 3. Greatly appreciate you being with us today. Another stellar lineup on tap. Bob Kravitz from bobkravitz.substack.com will be joining us, as will be Zach Osterman from the Indy Star, Rick Bozich, of course, from WDRB.com, and Brian Evans, a good friend of the show, former Indiana basketball player. Plenty to get to. We'll hear from Mike Woodson, as last night we had a press conference in which he met with the media for the first time in regards to the passing of legendary Indiana basketball coach Bob Knight. Also had a chance to speak with Calbert Chaney, in addition to a couple of the players. But we're just going to hear from the coaches today. Plenty to get to. In addition to continuing on with the story of Bob Knight's passing. Plenty of other things to get to. Of course, Big Ten football this weekend. Indiana with a gigantic home game against Wisconsin. Can they win that game? Can they? Yes. Will they? I don't know. They have the talent. I think they showed that last week against Penn State. It's just, I worry more about the decision-making than I worry about the talent in this game. I'm going to be flat honest with you. The NBA is having an in-season tournament, new little wrinkle. And the NCAA has made changes to the NIT that does not have everybody very happy. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are unhappy about how they have changed that around. Kirk Krissa, former player at Arizona, played against Indiana when they took on Arizona last year in Las Vegas, transferred to West Virginia, and he received a 9-game suspension after admitting to receiving impermissible benefits at Arizona. Former Arizona coach Book Richardson, he received a 10-year show cause, which means anybody that looks to hire him for 10 years has to show a damn good reason why, because he's basically blackballed. The head coach at that time, Sean Miller, he just received a nice fat extension at Xavier. Which brings to me to another not breaking, but continuing situation with Jim Harbaugh. Big Ten coaches are pissed off. They had a meeting. I think it's a regular meeting. I'm not sure if they're a Wednesday coaches meeting. But anyway, the Big Ten coaches held a call Wednesday with League Commissioner Tony Petitti and expressed their concerns. And there were some serious concerns. I mean, basically, they told him, said, this is BS. They're cheating. Now it comes out, Purdue, Coach Ryan Walters, Purdue goes to Michigan this weekend, has said they have video evidence that Michigan was at multiple games of theirs. So this scandal is not going away. It's getting deeper by the day. And the Big Ten coaches want something done now. They don't want them to wait, and they're pissed about when you go play them. They have basically cheated. So it's going to be interesting to see who blinks. Does the Big Ten bow up and sack up, as you'd say, and do something? Because we know the NCAA is going to wait until a year from now and release their findings from the investigation, yada, yada. But yeah, I do not. I know I am a Big Ten proponent, and it will hurt the Big Ten right now to do anything to Michigan, because that would be a blow to making sure the Big Ten gets a team into the college football playoffs. Because let's say that Ohio State were to lose to Michigan, and Michigan would go on to win the Big Ten championship. That would be their entry in the college football playoffs. But if they are suspended, what happens there? That's a great question. Although Ohio State is currently number 1 in the college football playoff rankings. Petiti is scheduled to be in Ann Arbor, Michigan today for the Big Ten field hockey tournament. A source said Petiti likely will meet with Michigan President Santaono on his trip. Coaches have generally avoided publicly discussing this Michigan allegation. Walters and said Purdue's evidence of Michigan activities has caused changes in preparation for Saturday's game. They've had to change what they were not that Purdue was expected to go in there and win, but it makes you think, even though this is Indiana, and yeah, I'm going to use Indiana as an example. Look what Indiana was able to do at Penn State. But yet at Michigan, they were just crushed. You're not going to tell me that, Indiana was probably easier to scout. It's something has to be done. The ADs offer support, but they say that the Big Ten must step up. While no potential punishments were discussed, Petiti acknowledged speaking with the NCAA about its investigation, although he refused to divulge any details of that conversation. One of the issues that Petiti brought up with the ADs was that he couldn't make a decision on Michigan this season based on a whim, that he would need to go a set of facts to go off of. What the hell do you need more? They've got video evidence out to yin-yang here. We've got pictures. They're going to determine, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, Central Michigan against Michigan State. It's very probable that was Connor Stalions on their sideline watching Michigan State. Petiti says he still needs to speak with the Big Ten presidents on the matter, which I don't understand why presidents of universities are involved in this. They don't know jack about sports for the most part. They don't know jack from what's going on immediately in the sports world for the most part, other than what they're told. They're not following it like a lot of other people. So why is it not just the athletics directors, the directors, the guys who are involved in athletics every day? I don't understand why presidents who just know little and can easily be swayed, because sports are only a part of what they're in their mind is a part of their school. And I've never understood that. I think that is just dumb. But what's next to come out of this? I mean, there has been video evidence at Ohio State. There is a paper trail of this by Connor Stalions. And now you've got Purdue coming out. That's just because other places are still looking. They're still searching. Well, what can we find now? Because they hadn't looked. So it's going to take them a little bit. But it's, we'll see. We'll see. Lots coming up today. Like I said, looking forward to talking to Bob Kravitz. We're going to hear from Mike Woodson and Calbert Cheney in regards to Bob Knight. Looking forward to talking to Brian Evans as well and Rick Bozich too. How's your day going? Appreciate everybody being with us. Jumping on the Andy Moore Honda hotline, of course, as we come to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios here on this Friday. Tomorrow's game with Indiana, an early one at noon for you ardent tailgaters. But I'll have to be out there early as well. So not looking forward to that. I hate early days like that. When it's cold. When it's warm, it's great. Cody jumping on from Fort Wayne. Hup, appreciate you, man. Fred from Easton, Pennsylvania. Kevin from Jeffersonville. Indiana also with their second and final exhibition game tonight as they take on Marion. And ironically, the AD of Marion is Joby Wright, a former player and I believe former assistant to Bob Knight. Didn't he go to Texas Tech? I believe he did. Las Vegas, Larry's on. John from Southport. There's Bob from down at Georgetown. Mike. Heath. Fred says Calbert Cheney was the most respectful to all the reporters in his responses regarding his thoughts on Coach Knight. Class in a tough time. It's funny you mentioned that. He was the loosest of everybody. He came in, when Calbert came into the room, before he was halfway to the podium, I think he said, "Hey, everybody." And then nobody said anything. He said, "Y'all can't speak." And then I think myself and someone else, "Hey, Calbert, how are you?" You don't get that. Usually it's they walk to the podium, then they might say, "Hey, I hope everybody's doing well," or something. But Calbert is he looks like he's a different cat, man. He's loose. He is loose, and that was cool to see. But we'll hear from him later. Looking forward to that. Very much so. And much more. Bob Kravitz up next. We'll take a break, so we'll be ready for him right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
How is everybody? Hey, for those of you that are following on YouTube, if you are not subscribed, please do so. We would appreciate it very much.
All right.
Oh, the patch. The patch.
We go live here in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. Coming to you, of course, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, high atop the 18th fairway on this Friday. One of the things that Indiana University is doing is, in honor of Bob Knight, the men's and women's programs will be wearing a patch on their home and away jerseys with RMK for Robert Montgomery Knight and the 3 stars above it for the 3 national championships that he won. Also, the football team announced that they will also be wearing stickers like that on their helmet. And so I've already seen a lot of people ask if those will be sold in some form. So there you go. But now we welcome in the man of the hour, Bob Kravitz from bobkravitz.substack.com.
How are you, Jim?
Cannot complain, sir. I am here and kicking and above ground.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yes, sir. That's always good. There's lots to talk about.
Yes.
Ironically, a couple of polarizing figures. Obviously, one, Bob Knight. The other, Jim Harbaugh. We'll get to that. Of course, Bob Knight first. Indiana, the state of Indiana still, even though this was something that everybody knew was coming, when it's someone of that stature, of that level, of that importance that has had such an impact on when you grew up, things of that nature, it still hits heavy.
It does. You know, I was thinking last night about some of the impact that Coach Knight has had. And one of the things, and I'll give credit to some of the radio guys here in Indianapolis for bringing it up. It's true that there is a style of basketball that is so closely associated with the state of Indiana. Like, you go to a playground, everybody's running motion, everybody's playing man-to-man, everybody's, I mean, when I used to play pickup basketball, I was always stunned at just how smart they play the game here and the style in which they play. And it just occurred to me, you just never see anybody play a zone around here. It's kind of like when Peyton Manning came along and all these little high school quarterbacks started screaming Omaha and pointing here and pointing there. And, so there's a style of play in basketball that is so closely associated with Coach Knight. And that to me is an ultimate, it's pretty cool. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And another stat that sticks out is that in all his years, with all the success, 3 national championships, probably, I don't know, at least 3 to 4 could have been national championships. All that was a ton of talent, but with all that talent, only one NBA All-Star.
Right, Isaiah Thomas. Yeah, he never, for whatever reason, you would have thought maybe a Calbert Chaney or somebody like that would have been an all-star, but he got, look, he got terrific talent in here. But those were the days of winning at the college level. It wasn't about getting kids prepared for the NBA necessarily. And Knight, if a kid can go to the NBA, great, like Isaiah, but I think Knight was trying to prepare them for something else.
Yeah, winning it. He knew that he had, or he thought that he had a not a style, but a program. A system that if you do what I say to do, we will be successful. And right. I'm not going to say it didn't matter who was in those positions. You had to have talent, but it didn't always have to be a guy that's an NBA All-Star. He could take talent and elevate it and make it work. And as he did many times. And so that is something that Indiana fans got used to. And for everyone that has followed him, that has not been a shadow that they've been able to escape.
No. I mean, about a year or two ago when I was with The Athletic, I wrote about, what the hell has happened to this program over the past, 25 years. And so much of it goes back to the schism between those who followed Bob Knight and were loyal to Bob Knight and those who just wanted to forget that whole thing ever happened. And it's been kind of nice here in the last year or so with Scott Dolson, who I called Frank in my story. Don't ask me why. Scott and actually Frank Dolson was a retired sports writer in Philadelphia. That's where I got that. But no, and to see Mike Woodson have the success that he's had so far, it's nice to see that, on his dying day, that Indiana is back to being a Bob Knight production, with the current team.
Yeah, and by that, everybody, I know that you and you mean we're talking about all the good points, all the great things, because yes, there were some, he definitely had his demons, but I have my demons. His were magnified, but he was magnified. He was a gigantic force of nature. He had an aura around him that anytime he walked into a room, you knew if there was something there. I mean, first of all, was an imposing presence at 6'5" and a big dude who you already knew you knew that could had that ability to go off. So he was just an imposing presence.
He was, and I remember when I met him, and I mentioned this in my story on bobkravitz.substack.com, free plug. The first time that I met him, I don't know if you had a chance to read my story yet. First time I met him, he was buck-ass naked. He came out of a shower. He plopped down on a big red leather seat and just sat there naked for a half hour or so. Made no attempt to cover up, didn't have a washcloth, nothing. And I think clearly he was trying to intimidate me. He was trying to throw me off my game. And I would say that he was mildly successful. I think I did a pretty good job of faking it. I was kind of a smart-ass New York kid, who didn't put up with a lot of stuff. So I think I handled it okay. But inside, I was dying a little bit, believe me.
Oh, I guarantee it. And I didn't realize you were a student then, a sophomore. So you were 20 years old, 19, 20 years old.
Right. 19 years old.
I've heard of him doing that to players, young players. It's everything he did, at least in his mind, he had a rhyme and a reason of what he was doing. And some of them were just crazy ass things like coming out buck ass naked like you have in your story.
Yeah, look, there are a lot of things that I found contemptible about the man. I'll be perfectly honest. I thought that he was physically and emotionally abusive at times. There are a lot of things to dislike a lot, but there was a lot to like too. I mean, that's the thing, is that he was a completely polarizing figure. At times when I covered Indiana, I felt like I was covering a cult, because no matter what he did, it didn't matter. He was their guy. And I won't compare it to a current political figure, but there was a lot of that there.
Yeah, and the players, though, the loyalty that, for the most part, it is unwavering. But there's also a list of bigger names that he fell out with. Sometimes they reconciled, some didn't. And it's just he was an enigma, man.
You're either with him or against him, Jim. You either, if you were with him and you were somebody who could help him win, he was a great presence in your life. If you were media or that poor schmuck out in Salt Lake City, the guy who introduced him or said he wasn't going to be speaking at a press conference, and then he went off on him. Then he wasn't such a nice guy. So, to me, a measure of a man is how you treat people who don't really matter. And he didn't always treat people who didn't matter very well.
Yeah. So there was definitely the good, the bad, and the ugly there. And Indiana fans are still mourning his loss, and Indiana will be wearing patches on their jerseys for the remainder of the year and some stickers on their helmets. And last night in meeting with Mike Woodson, you could tell he was affected by this. Obviously, someone's been closer to him for a long time. You hear stories from him, from Isaiah Thomas, who talks about, hey, man, he changed my life. And this is a guy that, a white guy, forgive me for saying so, but here's some white dude who would go into a home on the south side of Chicago of an a very poor African-American family, or a home in Indianapolis of a poor African-American family, and didn't matter. He was Bob Knight. And every time these people tell the stories, it's their mom who said that, almost said, that's where you're going.
Right.
Time and time again.
Knight recruited mothers. He did. Knight recruited mothers because he understood that while mothers wanted their children to be successful at basketball, what they wanted more than anything was for their child to come out of college as a man and have a degree. And Knight convinced them, and for good reason, because he followed up. He convinced them that if they sent their child to Indiana University, that they would walk out as better men, and they would walk out with a degree from a terrific college and university. And so he appealed to them, and he was highly successful. It would be interesting to see how he would have survived in the modern day with NIL and pay for play, or whatever you want to call it. I think it would have run him out of the game, honestly, if he had to operate in the modern day.
Well, I think it would run a lot of people. I agree with you, him more than most, but because he was so anti-cheating, he was able to recruit the type of player he needed for his system.
Right.
But now that would be completely altered by having to pay certain guys and this and that, and it would probably drive him nuts.
Yeah, it would make him crazy. I think he'd be off hunting and fishing rather than coaching in this modern climate.
Absolutely. Want to switch topics real quick. Still in the Big Ten, though, but the Jim Harbaugh Michigan situation continues to grow, as now I've seen that Purdue has evidence that Michigan was at multiple games of theirs as they head to Michigan this weekend, and that they have had to change multiple things because of that.
Wow. Well, let me ask, because I just literally rolled out of bed. Is this a new thing with Purdue? Did that just come out, Jim? Or
I did see. I don't have to look. It had to come out late yesterday or today.
Okay, I must have missed it, but yeah, I feel like the last journalist on earth who hasn't had a scoop on this Connor Stallions guy. It's unbelievable. But though, what would really be funny is if it turned
This
out
came out at 12:02 a.m. By the way.
Okay. All right. Bob was asleep at that time.
So was Jim.
Yeah. So I'll have to check that out. But what would be funny is if they had somebody trying to steal signs from Indiana.
Well, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm like, I'm begging, hoping to see that they did that, and I'm like, okay, that just seals it right there.
It's like shooting gnats with an elephant gun.
Well, one would think that, but after Indiana had and I don't want to be a pie in the sky person, but they had a great showing against Penn State at Penn State. They started off with a great start against Michigan. First team to lead them after the first quarter. Were one receiver, I think it was Omar Cooper, had a heel out of bounds. They were that away from leading 14 or putting 14 points on Michigan. No one had done that. Well, then all of a sudden, boom, things go awry. But it makes you wonder. But the Big Ten coaches had a meeting with Tony Petitti and have expressed great disdain and that they want something done now.
And they should. And look, I think at some point this thing will end up on Jim Harbaugh's lap. I think it's very close to being there. What amazes me is that Michigan is talking about a contract extension. I'm like, wait a minute. Can we wait till the investigation is done and see just how responsible Harbaugh is for all of this? Based on what we know now, it sounds to me like Harbaugh is dirty up to his earlobes.
Without question. He's are there 3 investigations going on right now?
I think that's right.
It's just nuts. Well, I think I got that from reading this, but the coaches are pissed, and they've told the commissioner this, and they've told him that they're mad that they haven't done anything. And the Big Ten is like, well, we want to wait till the NCAA's. Well, hell, you'll be waiting until the Mars landing again.
Right. No, it's an interesting situation. I realize that I know why the rule is in place, and I can understand. I mean, the fact that this guy he's like, where's Waldo, showing up at the sideline for a game with Michigan State and
Central Michigan.
I mean, that is dirty stuff, and they've got to throw. They got rid of him. He was, he had to go. But I think this is going to end up right in Harbaugh's lap, and he's gonna be in trouble for a long time.
Well, there's no way that he didn't know. Number one,
no way.
There's just no way. This is way too deep. There are expenditures. There's just way too much. But my question is also in regard to Central Michigan. He's wearing Central Michigan coaching garb, every bit of it, hat, shirt, the pants. So I'm wondering, how did that come about? That had to be helped by Central Michigan.
You would think so. McElwain the other day said they looked at the list of sideline passes they distributed, and he was not on the list. So let's face it. I work at Ball State. From what I'm told by the kids up there, just about anybody can get down on the sideline. There's not a lot of security at a lot of these games, and you can dress up and look the part and probably not have a whole lot of trouble getting down the sideline.
Yeah, I agree to a certain level, but with him having the exact same coaching wardrobe they were wearing, was a specific Adidas gray shirt,
right?
A specific pants and the hat. I'm like, so he's got a buddy that gave him that.
Well, you can, maybe that's a possibility. Sure. I mean,
unless he was thinking ahead and ordering it online, baby.
He may have. I mean, This guy does not strike me as a genius, though.
Nope, he's good at the other thing, but was not smart enough to not leave a paper trail. He would not be a good CIA spy, that's for certain.
No.
What are you focusing on this weekend?
Well, got Pacers tonight. I might write. We got the Colts on Sunday, and Monday Victor Wembanyama comes to town to play the Pacers, so I'll do that. And I've got a mailbag. Sometime next week. So I'll be busy, but I hope people get a chance to read my Bob Knight trip down memory lane. We had quite a contentious relationship, and I hope people will take time to read it.
Yes. One quick comment too. Bob has a new logo.
Logo graphic. Yeah,
graphic, and I love it because it's. I think when we first talk, this is kind of what I was thinking. The cigar has got to be shorter and stubbier.
We are in the process of getting that done. I wrote the lady back, and I said, quite frankly, it looks like I'm smoking a blunt. So I need.
That's why you spelled out that was a cigar. I kind of thought so.
Yeah. So she is making a cigar for me, and that will be rectified here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, otherwise, I love it. Looks great.
I thought it was great.
It looks great. Perfect. BobKravitz.substack.com is where you need to go. He's got a great story out right now about his first meeting with Bob Knight. Bob Kravitz, thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Thank you, buddy. Take care of yourself.
You have a great weekend. We're back with
too.
more here at Indiana Sports Beat Radio. When we come back, we'll hear from Mike Woodson in addition to Calbert Cheney, their comments on the passing of Bob Knight. When we come back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Woo! Hello, Chris from jolly old England. How are you this morning? Spot of tea? Have you become a tea drinker? Good morning, Cheryl Sizemore. How are you? From Remax Realty. Make sure. If you're looking for a home in the Indianapolis area, reach out to Cheryl. Cheryl at IndyHomePros.com. Wonderful supporter. Oh, I'm sure he is. And that's a recruiting element that's, I think, is coming to a head by next Friday. Just guessing. I'm just thinking next Friday's the day. That would be virtually impossible, Robert. I mean, just no way. There's no way. There's no way anybody's taking my cell phone away. I'm like, dude, I have it for reasons other than that. But no, they yeah. I think there's a reason for that, Kent. Somebody helped him. As soon as I saw that photo, I'm like, he's dressed exactly like the coaches. Otherwise, he would have just bought tickets into this game like he had for every other game. But lower level team, lower level Division I team, somebody knew somebody. Let's just say that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that.
All right, Jim. We go live in 5.
We're going to use the clips here.
Okay, I'll have them ready. They're ready. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. It is another game day for Indiana men's basketball as they will take on Marion tonight in their second and final exhibition game. Of course, that's where is Joby. I'm trying to figure out, is Joby Wright still with Marion? I know that would be a long time for him. I'm trying to look up real quick on my some information that I would have that may lead me to that. But Indiana, another question is, how do they come out after watching them in their last game, first half, it was very mundane. Second half, it was like they had a meeting with Bob Knight at the halftime. So, and speaking of halftime, IU Athletics plans to honor and celebrate the life of Hall of Fame head coach men's basketball coach Bob Knight in the coming days and throughout the rest of the 23-24 season. Knight, of course, led Indiana to 3 national championships, 11 Big Ten titles from 1971 through 2000. Passed away at the age of 83 on Wednesday. Also, they won 37 consecutive Big Ten games in basketball. That record I just don't think that could ever be beaten. But we'll find out. Speaking of which, we'll get back to that. Yesterday, we had the chance to talk to Mike Woodson and Calbert Cheney. Mike Woodson obviously moved by this, and I think my exact question, that's what I was actually trying to look up, my exact question to him, but because everyone has been affected by Knight, if they were around him in different ways, how they coach, how they played the game, things of that nature. And I asked Mike Woodson about in-game. We know about what Bob Knight did as far as preparation. Mike Woodson talked about he was so all about preparation. But once you got into a game, things change. And I asked him, what was it about in-game things that Knight was able to do and see that impressed him, and what was something that stood out to him? And here's what Coach Mike Woodson had to say.
Well, it's hard to describe it unless you're there on the floor and you're playing the game, and going through it. I think one game that truly stands out is over in Puerto Rico playing for the gold medal. And that meant so much to Coach because of all the turmoil that surrounded that gold medal. And I remember playing Puerto Rico, and we were up, I think, 13 with about 4 or 5 on the clock. Thought we could really coast out and win the gold medal, and they made a hell of a run to cut our lead to 3. And I was the captain of that team, and I remember him calling the timeout. And he grabbed me by my jersey and he pulled me into his face. And from the viewer's eyes, you guys probably thought, hey, he's up to no good. And he pulled me and he said, Woody, don't let us lose the gold medal. And we went back out and went on a 9-0 run to bring the gold medal home. It's just the little things. He could have not pulled me in and just said, hey, come on, let's go win this thing. But he came to the main source, and that was me being the captain. And the fact that he pulled me in never once entered my mind. It was what he said. And it registered. We got the job done, won the gold medal, and came home.
There you go. And see, that's a moment that if you were watching this on TV and you saw a coach grab a player like that and say something, you don't know what's being said. Remember that. I grew up used to my coach grabbing me by the face mask and saying something. And sometimes it was simply, they were calling a play, but they were just juiced and jacked. They weren't mad or angry, and they grabbed me by the face mask. Give me a green 14, 16, 25 sweep XY. Go! But that, from a distance, that can look very different than what it actually was. And what he just showed, that energized him, because it was not about being grabbed. He was in the moment of what was being said. Great explanation. I asked Calbert Cheney, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to spend the time with, talk to great people like, Todd Leary, Pat Graham, guys that played with Calbert in that era when I was in school. And the one thing I've learned through talking to, whether it's Pat or Todd or Brian Evans, that everybody has their notebooks. How many times have you heard players talk about having notebooks from their time playing college basketball? Well, all these guys that played for Bob Knight had notebooks because they were expected to take notes. This was, in essence, a 400 level class, and not just basketball, but in preparation, in just so many different things. And I think that they have carried this over to life. But the most impressive thing is, I've never heard of anyone who told me they didn't have their notebooks. And but I asked Calbert how that type of atmosphere, what it has meant to him, his growth, and where he is today. Here's what he had to say.
Huge. I still have my notebook up in my office right now. It's on the shelf, so it's all about teaching the concept, how the game works. I think sometimes a lot of players, they don't understand how the game works. They just want the ball in their hands and they just want to tell everybody to get out the way. But you got to know how the game works because you got 4 of the guys out there on the floor. And so he was very, very detailed in teaching us how to play on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, special situations, all that stuff, prepare for teams that came in here. It got to the point. Another thing that was in reference to preparing for teams, there's so much video involved, and this certain play, this is what this player is going to do. And then it got to a certain point to where when you got out there on the floor and you saw the play, them call a certain play, you knew exactly what they were going to run because we were so prepared. And that's what separated the coach from a lot of coaches, from a lot of other coaches.
Calbert Cheney, the director of player development for Indiana, talking about his learning experience from his time in Indiana. And then I also saw a post from AJ Guyton, which he didn't have to post this for me to know this, but pointed out, said, I definitely got the most hugs from Coach Knight. And he did. For whatever reason, there just seemed to be this father-son relationship with AJ Guyton and Bob Knight. And that is one that AJ, and I look forward to having him on sometime to talk about that. He's been on with us many, many times, but he was not ready to do that just yet. So you can see I'd say he's been affected by as many people as outside of that deal. So, the effects that carry on. Yes, I'm not going to pretend that Bob Knight didn't have his faults, that he didn't have some bad faults. There's things that he did that most of you have no idea about. I'll tell you that weren't good. He was, wasn't watching, but it was on in when I was eating last night someplace. Oh, over at Hoosier Hanks East. The food is incredible over there, by the way. Over by the mall in the old Avers Public House. But they had, what daggone it, the show with Tony Kornheiser and the guy from the Washington Post, who is a Chicago-based reporter. But they were talking, and Wilbon was saying that he had spent so much time trying to get his thoughts solidified on night because he knew the good, but he knew the bad. And he said he only talked to two players and sent condolences to. One was Isaiah Thomas, and the other was Quinn Buckner, two of the greatest players to ever play for Knight, both from Chicago, and said he had long conversations with them. Why is that loyalty there? And so, and they gave him their answers. And so he left it with Bob Knight is just one of the most enigmatic, figures that there just has been. And that's just how it's going to be. It's a guy who did some great things that people don't know about. He did a lot of things that people don't know about. That's another thing. So for all the bad things that he did that you don't know about, there was a lot of great things that he did for people that you don't know about. And not just his own players. As a matter of fact, Wilpon told a story about a kid that he had recruited. I couldn't hear it, so I didn't know who it was. He recruited this kid, but he ended up going to Iowa. Something happened, and Bob Knight still did something on his own to raise money for this kid who had gone to Iowa. And so that was just something there's been many others. But again, I'm not trying to sway somebody. He's just a figure that has been polarizing, was polarizing, and will remain polarizing. He brought a great deal of happiness to a lot of Indiana fans from afar. And you know what? That's going to be their take, and it gets to be, and they get to do that. So everybody gets to have their own opinion, and that's just how it's going to be. But the one thing you cannot take away is his greatness on the court, because it's almost unparalleled, unmatched what he did. It is the effect on his players. Not that he's the only one that has loyalty, but for someone that has been so polarizing to have that loyalty, it's you just don't see that all the time. We've got to take a break, get into our second hour. Zach Osterman, Rick Bozich, Brian Evans, all coming up. I think Rick may join me next, but we'll take a break and we'll be back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Gee whiz. Yeah, Rick Bozich is coming up next.
Okay, here's Rick.
Ricky B.
What's up, guys?
How are you doing, sir?
I'm okay. How are y'all?
I am. I'm getting a little warm, to be honest with you. I drank 2 cups of coffee, and wow, it's amazing what that does to a body.
What time's the exhibition game tonight?
6:30.
Gotcha. What time's the game Monday? Is it 6:30 also?
You got me on that one.
I mean Tuesday. I think I'm coming Tuesday.
You looking it up?
Yeah.
All right.
How was the press conference yesterday?
It was good. The players, I think they brought the wrong players in.
Yeah.
They had the two captains. It should have been. I think they should have brought in. Damn it! They should have brought in
Anthony Leal.
Anthony Leal, number one, and they should have brought in Jordan Hulls.
Right.
His grandfather was on Knight's first staff.
Yes, he was. J.C. Hulls.
Well, that's his dad.
Oh,
his
no. What was his grandfather? I remember. I know you're talking about.
But I mean that.
And 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. It's November 3rd. Appreciate you being with us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Now the great Rick Bozich with us. Rick, thanks a lot. I know that the last couple of days things have been moving all over the place. And so Ruby thinks so. She says, hey, man, I hear you. She's got thoughts. But obviously the biggest topic is, of course, the passing of Bob Knight. You are someone, much like I'm sure you haven't had a chance to read Bob Kravitz's story that he wrote, but I urge you to, because he was in a very similar situation writing for the student newspaper. And as a sophomore, he in 1980, he walked into the office and waited, and Knight comes out as, in his words, buck ass naked, and plopped down on an easy chair and proceeds to do the interview that way the whole time. At least you didn't get that. He tried to leave you on the tarmac or something like that, but at least you weren't naked, or he wasn't naked.
You know, it's funny. Last night I was talking to Russ Brown, who covered Knight. He and I guess Bill Bennett.
Oh, wow.
Covered him as much as anybody, except for Hamill. And Russ Brown told me that he got the naked treatment too. So it must have been a thing.
Well, I've heard this happen to certain players. I think that it may have been Damon Bailey, of all things.
Wow.
And I'm not going to repeat who told me that story, but they had to go find. Back then, you know, you didn't. This cell phone thing wasn't a deal, and
I know. Yeah.
So they had a tree, a phone call tree that they had to use to find Damon Bailey at times. So assistant coach finally had him and brought him in for a meeting, and he said I think that's the same treatment, but that's Knight. That's him doing all of these things with, whether it seems crazy or not, he's got a reason why he's doing that.
Yeah, and I'm thankful that I didn't qualify for that level of whether it's intimidation or what it is. You know, I've read about other powerful people in history. Lyndon Johnson, I don't think he did the stuff, but he did partly. He would talk to reporters, and he would be on the toilet.
On the crapper. On the crapper.
Yeah. So I don't know what that's all about, but you know, I remember the first time that I flew with the team. I think it was a Northwestern Wisconsin road trip, and just every player. I mean, I don't think anybody said more than 3 words from the time they got on the bus in Bloomington, got on the plane at the Bloomington airport, flew to wherever we landed in the Chicago area, got off the plane, got on the bus, and got to the hotel in Evanston. I mean, nobody said a word. And so I don't think I ever said a word on any road trip. And that's just the way that it was. He ran a tight ship, man.
Yeah, I got to tell a story earlier this week I was working at WOKY in Louisville. I had actually gone there as an intern, and was lucky enough to get an overnight news anchor job while I was there, which was wild. in and of itself. But since I was on payroll, they started using me in sports to do things as an extra photographer, extra, field reporter type of thing. And I was at one of my first press conferences, and I asked some question about Eric Anderson's performance after they had gotten beaten by Jimmy Jackson's Ohio State team. And you don't know a damn thing about basketball, yada yada. And that was it. Out to that ended the press conference, and apparently Kirkpatrick was standing next to me and said, "Some people think I know something about basketball." And I think that was a good question.
Yeah, it's funny. I just got a text from Kirkpatrick this morning since I mentioned him in my column, and he said at one point Knight sent him a book, and the cover was "Everything I Know About Basketball," and all the pages inside were blank. So I mean, I don't know. The way I took it sometimes is like, the player said when he yelled at you, it meant he was trying to coach you. Don't listen to the way he's doing it. Listen to what he's saying. But if he didn't say anything, then you need to be concerned. So if you were in the media and he yelled at you, it means he was paying attention to you. And if he didn't, it means you were not really on the radar.
I think he likes to see what you could take.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Testing you testing you. And I know that I've heard so many stories from players in different ways. But then there's also last night, the question I asked Woody about what he took from him, because everyone talks about the preparation. Bob Knight was just prepared. I mean, it was just always prepared, and the team was prepared. But I said, even with that, you get into a game, things just don't always go that way. I mean, everybody's prepared. As Mike Tyson said, everybody's prepared till you get punched in the mouth. But I said, what did you learn from the in-game sideline stuff? And he pointed out an episode when they were playing for the gold medal in the Pan Am games. Mm-hmm. And he said how much that meant to Bob Knight. And he said that they were up big, and all of a sudden they made this big run. They close it, and he calls a timeout. He said he reaches up and he grabs me and he pulls me in by the jersey. But he just simply said, "Woody, don't let us lose the gold." And that was it. And I'm like, you know what? There's so many times when we see people grabbing. Tom Izzo, I was used to that growing up. But you don't know what's being said. Right. So a lot of times people can see this, but they don't know what's actually being exchanged. And he said he took that, and he said he knew that he took that as an honor because I was the source, I was the man, and he expected that, and we went out and got the job done. So Bob Knight was just such an enigma, and always will be to people. He is always going to be a lightning rod, and that's fine.
And you're the last media member to ask him a question. Is that correct?
Well, to get the so-called interview, if you want to call it that, when he was at came back to the baseball game.
Right.
The funny thing is, he was never that happy at any point that I'd ever seen in an interview type situation in my life that I had been part of. He cracked a joke, even. So, but yeah, I feel fortunate to have gotten that, and it's not the greatest, but I will take it, man. And but yeah, it was cool to see him come back.
That was back in the day when a lot of people were convinced he would never come back. And I'd say that's one part of the story that is uplifting, is that he did come back and he did have the moment in Assembly Hall, because if that hadn't happened, so much of the conversation in the aftermath of his passing would have been about his refusal to come back, and IU fans being split over what happened and all that stuff. And so I give credit to Patrick Knight and Dr. Rink and Bob Hamill and Quinn Buckner and Scott Dolson and Scott May and everybody who was involved in Karen, his wife Karen, in terms of making that day happen, because it as you remember, it developed pretty quickly. Wasn't even sure he was going to do it until the day before, and it provided that that 5-minute ovation that he got, which is, he deserved it after everything he did for IU basketball over 29 years.
Yeah, and if you go back and watch some of those video clips, he's got his arms around, whether it's Isaiah or Quinn or Steve Green. I'm trying to remember some of the guys that are out there. He was the joy on his face. He was laughing. He was laughing. I mean, he looked like he had never been happier in his life at those moments, for real. And that's a positive to see. So to know that he got to enjoy something, hopefully knowing that he had built, and like Mike Woodson said, this is Bob Knight's house. Make no mistake about it. And that's true.
It is. Yeah. I mean, coincidentally, or however you tend to view it, but I mean, the Assembly Hall opened the same year he came there. He's the only guy that coached in that building for the first 29 years. And I always think that the part of his career that's really overlooked and underrated is the very first 2 years. Back in the first year, George McGinnis left, and he was left with a team that had Steve Downing, and freshmen weren't eligible then. So Greeno and Blaskowski and those guys couldn't play, but it was Steve Downing, Kim Pemberton, Bootsy White, Frank Wilson, Jerry Memring. There's one other one. John Ritter, who was a kind of an undersized, slow, but good shooter. And that team, I believe, finished second in the Big Ten and went to the NIT. And then the very next year, when Buckner and Cruz came, they were the starting guards as freshmen, and they went to the Final Four, and they were trailing UCLA by 1 point late in the game, and Steve Downing got a foul and fouled out of the game, and then UCLA ended up winning by 11 or something. But it was like, wow. Changed the whole dynamic around IU basketball at that point, and then it just took off from there. And he showed very early, and he did it different. I mean, Indiana was known as as I wrote it, the Hurricane Hoosiers. I mean, it was like Jimmy Rail and the Van Arsdale twins and John McLaughlin and all. It was like shooting, scoring, running. And like Knight came in and said, no, that's not how we're going to play. And he got guys. Today you have the transfer portal and freshmen. He took what was leftovers. It was leftovers. And two of his first 4 games, he beat ranked teams, Kansas and Kentucky, 2 of the first 4 games of his career with leftovers. So think about that.
Yeah. I look back all the time and think, wow, just almost immediately. I mean, it was 0 to 100 fast.
Yes. And in 75 and 76, he did something that will never be repeated. Well, they're not going to play 18 games anymore, but he went 18-0 in the Big Ten in back-to-back years. I mean, think about
37 straight even.
Yeah.
Because someone reminded me they won their first game the following year. And you can talk about ifs, ands, and buts, but had Larry Bird stayed, wow, what happens? What happens?
Well,
Do they win another one in 77?
Well, I mean, you don't even have to be that imaginative. If Scott May doesn't break his arm, they probably win in 75. If Mike Woodson doesn't hurt his back, they could have won in 1980. If Alan Henderson doesn't hurt his knee, they could have won another one in the 90s. I mean, that's 3 right there. Should have at least, gotten one of those 3. So, I mean, he could have easily had 4, 5, or 6, easily.
Yeah, and not many people get that opportunity. And then Mike Krzyzewski, who has won 5, was his assistant. So it's just a tree that goes. And then we talked about the tree. I had Dustin May on yesterday. He was a manager, for God's sakes, not a player, not a guy looking. But these guys, they have those notebooks. I talked to Calvert about those notebooks. It was a class. It was not a bachelor's level. It was a doctorate in things, and it wasn't just basketball.
Yeah, and the players lived in McNutt, and they dressed in that tiny dressing room that was there off the corner where they coming off the floor. They didn't have a practice facility. I mean, it was just get the job done. It wasn't about everything that could be done to make the players comfortable. It was like, what can you do for Indiana basketball? I mean, the world has changed, but I try and keep it in the context of how it was back then.
Yep. Quick before you get out of here, Big Ten basketball or football coaches are pissed off.
Yeah.
Pissed off at
And
Tony
they should be.
Petitti, the commissioner of the Big Ten,
They should be.
and they want something done. And now it's come out that Purdue has evidence that Michigan has been at their games, and Purdue goes to play Michigan this weekend. They've had to change things because of that. This is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, I give props to Purdue coach Ryan Walters. A lot of these coaches talk anonymously, or they're sort of wishy-washy in what they say, and he pretty much said, "Hey, let's call it. We don't have to speculate. We know what they did. What are we waiting on here?" And he's going up to play at Ann Arbor tomorrow. He's going to get the business when he gets there, but he didn't care. Good for him. I mean, every coach in the league should stand up and say something about it, because all they're going to do otherwise is what the NCAA and the conferences always do, is just stall and stall and stall, and they're going to play it out, and then they'll retroactively punish them after it's over, and that's not the way it should be.
No, this to me is definitely about money. This is the Big Ten not wanting to take a potential slot away from the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
If Michigan happens to beat Ohio State and Penn State, they don't want to not have a team in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, they want to make sure Michigan's eligible for the college football playoffs, so there would be no way they would be shut out. And in the best case scenario, they'd like to have two teams in the college football playoff, because they've only won one Ohio State title, and the SEC has dominated for so long. But this is so outlandish that Michigan would boldly do this stuff. Well, that video showed up this week, and the guy was on the sideline at the Central Michigan game. It's like, I mean, that really is pretty bold, man. Can you imagine if Knight was the coach of the opposing team and he found out that people were doing that to him?
Well, if he found out during the game, he'd probably go over there and personally take care of the situation. Rick, I can't thank you enough for coming on today, as always, and we look forward to talking to you again, buddy. Have a great rest of your weekend.
I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, sir. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com. We've got more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star joins me next, right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Oh, man, these shows have been so fast this week.
Yeah, you shouldn't have any slow news weeks for a while.
Oh, Brian Evans. Zach's just going to be on for just like a quick 9 minutes, and then I'll finish out the segment.
Sounds good.
Man, Facebook is just, I better not say it.
I think the audience wants you to say it.
What's that?
What Facebook is?
They're ridiculous. Unfortunately, Twitter is becoming Facebook. Yesterday, there was a female that, and had, I guess, nothing to, I don't know. It's one of those people that, why are you tweeting on Twitter? It's basically a bunch of Facebook, what I call Facebook shit. Oh, my kid is so amazing. He's so into football. Yada yada. I don't care. Why is this on Twitter? Get that shit out of here.
All right, Zach's here, and it's time for us to go live. So I'll throw him in and count you guys in here. We go live.
Perfect.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Hey, welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Friday. Of course, then joined now by Zach Osterman from the Indy Stars. Zach, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Thank you very much for asking. I know it's been a long couple of days for everybody. So much going on, in addition to, of course, nothing bigger than the passing of Bob Knight, legendary Indiana basketball coach, that we've been dealing with that. There's also the situation with the Big Ten and Jim Harbaugh that continues to escalate. Indiana has a football game on Saturday that is of uber importance to them, and Tom Allen, and they have a basketball game tonight as well. So other than that, not a lot going on.
Right. Yeah. Other than that, there's really not much to talk about.
First of all, Zach, you weren't around to cover Bob Knight, but you've been around long enough to cover so many things that involved him. And you have spoken to so many people that are on both sides of the fence. I've already said, of course, he was a polarizing figure, and different people have different takes, but the extremes of the loyalty by so many people is a telling sign that he was certainly loved by a lot of people.
Yeah, I think, listen, the thing I have tried very hard to do in the last couple days, is just sort of say, I'm not here to tell you how to feel about Bob Knight. That's up to you. And I think one of I think one of the things about Bob Knight is there's no secret about his legacy. When we have sports figures who might have complex or controversial legacies, sometimes it's because that legacy changes over time. I think about it. I mean, it's an extreme example, but like Joe Paterno, we had to reckon with this, just complete reversal of how we were supposed to view Joe Paterno, the lens through which we were supposed to sort of understand and appreciate his career, because of something that happened very near the end of his life. Bob Knight made no secret and very little apology for who he was. And if you if you loved him, if you didn't, that's up to you. But I think that what's difficult sometimes for people, because we want to put people in buckets. We want things to be very easily sortable, if you understand my point.
And a lot of people want it to be how they want it to be.
Yeah, we just want it to be simple. We don't. I mean, like nuance and complexity. These are things that take time, and they can kind of consume our days and nights, and they can sort of make us uncomfortable at times and make us challenge our own sorts of assumptions or whatever. I think Bob Knight can be a lot of, if not all of the things that people say that he is. I mean, it can be true that Bob Knight could be a bully, that Bob Knight could be verbally abusive to his players, all the things that his critics would point to. It can also be true that Knight was deathly loyal to people who were loyal to him, that he, performed a lot of sort of like, I guess you'd say, small to medium acts of kindness that he was very uncomfortable with anybody knowing about, that he tried very hard to keep secret, that certainly that if you consider his impact on the game of basketball, it was immense. He's a complex figure, admittedly, like most human beings are. I don't think it's controversial to say he had his flaws, but I don't think it's hard to understand why, for example, his former players stood so firmly behind him. Just using them as an example, because there was a part of Bob Knight that was also genuinely, did genuinely good things and had genuinely good intentions. And again, I suppose over the years, I myself have become pretty Bob Knight agnostic. I didn't grow up in Indiana. I don't mean him any ill will or goodwill. I'm just sort of not, I don't have a strong personal opinion either way. But what I would say is that I think it's all right to sort of see the shades of gray, at least in my mind, and to see Knight however you want to, and also to appreciate, again, the layers and the complexities of the man, frankly.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of people don't understand brilliance like he had, and there's no question that he was a brilliant mind in certain ways, and I mean brilliant. But we've often seen brilliant people be so polarizing the opposite way in different ways, not always the same way, but it's just certain brains are just certain ways. Why he was the way he was in certain ways and others, maybe we'll never know. Was it the success? Did success breed that? Was it just already there? Who knows? But the one thing you cannot take away was the success, was the brilliance, is the loyalty that's there. But there are a lot of things in the past, and I tell people all the time, there's so many things that you don't know about that plus what you already do know about. It's a hard balance. It's a hard thing to keep balanced if you do know a lot of those things.
And again, that's why I've just sort of tried to say, whenever I've talked about this, I don't want to tell anybody how they should feel about Bob Knight. That's entirely up to you. And I think it's also, listen, I think he means different things to different people, and I think that his importance, kind of, I guess, climbs in different ways to different people for different reasons. And that speaks to frankly, the extent to which in some ways Knight, almost rose above his sport in his prominence, in his rose above sports in general. I mean, he was one of the most recognizable American public figures for a substantial period of time. I said this yesterday.
As a college basketball coach, no less.
I think there was a time where the average American, not just sports fan, but just American, would probably have been more likely to recognize a picture of Bob Knight than a picture of the sitting vice president, as an example. And that's just, sorry, my phone's going off here. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just saw a clip last night of him in, I guess it was Anger Management, the movie. He was in Blue Chips. Not many coaches get asked to do those things. Now, of course, most of those were because of what the public saw of him. But still, there's not that many people that rose, especially back then, that rose to that level of prominence.
No, and I think it's harder for coaches too. I think it's certainly harder for coaches too anymore. I think there's an extent to which it was harder in college basketball at that time. College basketball was only beginning to really sort of, broach the. Sorry, I'm getting a call here. I'm not sure what's going on only beginning to sort of broach the popularity through ESPN, through the NCAA tournament, that it would eventually enjoy. I mean, when Knight takes over the NCAA tournament, it's only 16 teams. Games are shown on tape delay. I don't think I'm not even sure the Larry Bird Magic Johnson national title game was shown live. I'd have to double check that. But I mean, this was basketball as a sport was still very much in its infancy in terms of its national presence. And Knight was still, an outsized figure in so many ways.
It's ironic. How ironic is it? Indiana's game tonight is against Marion, and Steve Downing, is he still with Marion as their AD?
He's still. So Steve is still Marion's AD and has been for some time. And I know Bob Knight helped raise money for educational scholarships at Marion. I think, again, when you talk about maybe his most beloved former players, the players that probably were with him the longest, I think Steve Downing may have even gone to Texas Tech with him for a period of time. Just very much one of those people who remain sort of central to Knight's life long after Indiana.
Well, I know that we got to let you go. So you've got a lot of things going on today, and we appreciate you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm diving in and diving out at the same time. I apologize.
Hey, buddy, appreciate you as always. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star. We'll talk to you next week, my friend.
Sounds good. Talk to you, Jim.
You betcha. We've got, we don't have to take a break just yet. As a matter of fact, let's stick around here for a minute. Appreciate Zach coming on. There's just so much going on right now. As you've seen, we've had to completely reshuffle our lineup for the last couple of days, but we're very fortunate to be able to have the guys like John Laskowski and Dusty May and Joe Hillman, and just like Dan Dockage. Some people like him, some people can't stand him, but guess what? Everybody, that's fine. And I noticed when we repost some clips on social media, how many people, especially on Dan's post, and I'm not telling you whether to like him or dislike him. If you don't like him, fine. I don't care. If you like him, great. I don't care. It's the same with me. There's people that can't stand me because they don't like that I am what I would call now you homer. I'm not. But it just cracked me up. The comments say on one Facebook posting that I saw of the piece with Dan, it had about 10 comments that were negative, but there were 150 likes of it. So it's funny how people spout out, but none of those people listened. I will guarantee you not one of them listened to that clip. The one thing I can't stand is for people to comment on headlines. Drives me insane. Do not comment on a headline. First of all, a headline is meant to get your attention, period. And then hopefully you will watch, listen to the content, whatever. And if not, that's fine. But if you don't, what the hell are you commenting on? Nobody cares what someone thinks who is not at least informed. And if you're not watching or listening to whatever it is you're commenting on, you're not informed. That would be like me sitting here, and I'm sure there's some people who think I don't know jack either, and maybe they're right. But it's not because I don't prepare every day, I promise you. There's just, it goes on and on. The preparation that you got to put in, page after page, yada, yada. Believe me. So don't comment on stuff that you don't at least read or listen to. Just my deal. Chris from England, Chris from Jolly Old England asking, didn't the Knight family ask if people wanted to donate something to donate to Marion University? They may have been part of that, but actually I know I saw something about the Alzheimer Association. That was one of them. I also know that there will not be a public a funeral per se, I guess, for the coach is the best way to put it. And I was wondering if that there might be something in Assembly Hall, because it would have been staggering. I think it would have been standing room only, to be honest with you. But I believe that they have asked not to do that. As I looking back through here, looking for that email that I saw, but I'm not going to be able to find it that quickly, unfortunately. But I do remember seeing that. So the family's been pretty private about it. Although IU Athletics is going to honor Coach Knight, as I mentioned, at the Friday night exhibition, in addition to wearing the patches on the men's and the women's teams for the rest of the season. Football team wearing decals on their helmet. He was a big supporter of IU football, whomever the coach was. He was a big supporter of them, supporter of all the other sports. He was friends with Doc Councilman, again, who he stole the candy stripes from, and I'm determined not to wear, but to get a pair of candy striped Speedos. And can somebody tell me if the IU swimming team still wears those? And if not, why not? Why not? Man, that's incredible. I loved learning that story. Just didn't know that. And John Leskowski is the greatest, because I'm telling you, there is no other player, no other former Indiana basketball player that knows more about the history of IU basketball than John Leskowski. First of all, he was fortunate enough to play in the early 70s when Knight first got here. He did television for all those years as well. So he knows his stuff. We've got to take a break. Brian Evans set to join us when we come back. Hope you're having a good Friday, November 3rd. We'll be back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Yeah, there we go. It's in that letter right there. Won't you quit? Let's see. I think my voice is going a little bit. Holy moly. Holy crap. I mean, we didn't even get to talk much about nothing.
Much ado to do about nothing.
Much ado.
Much to do as well.
Yep, the family, it was in the same email I was looking at, but out of respect for the family's wishes and desire for privacy, there are no public memorials planned by IU Athletics or Indiana University, which I'm a little surprised at that. I thought that they would have something at Assembly Hall. And if they did, that son of a bitch would be standing room only. That I promise you. The Big E.
How's it going?
Good, brother. Going faceless.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm driving.
No problem. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Cannot complain. How's Aurora doing?
Aurora's doing just fine. Doing just fine.
Where is it? Where'd Aurora go? Damn it.
Ready to go live?
Fun. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. We go live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio coming to you here on this Friday, November 3rd. And could not be happier to welcome in a great friend of the show, Brian Evans. Brian, how are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine. How about yourself?
I'm getting through, brother. Getting through. I have to tell you, I played one of my absolute favorite clips. I won't do it today since you're with us, but I played it before when you were on, where some practice where Knight was yelling at you. Hey! What the hell are we doing here, Brian? It's just one of my favorites, but. Getting yelled at by Knight back then probably sucked, but as you look back on that kind of stuff, what positives come back to you?
Oh man, so many great memories. And I was such a huge fan of Coach Knight's and a huge Indiana basketball fan as a kid. I've said this before, and it's very true. I was blown away by the opportunity to be there. I mean, I just, it was a dream of mine as a kid, right, to play for him. And so the yelling really didn't bother me. He'd get right in my face, and probably for the first 2 or 3 years I was there, he'd get up in my face. I mean, it happened a lot. And I just couldn't help but think, wow, Bobby Knight knows who I am. And it's just the truth. It wore off. I think it wore off in year 4 or 5, where I didn't want him in my face anymore. But I'm telling you, for the longest time, I just was so lucky to be there and I was improving. Everything that he did really did work on me. It worked for me and it worked on me, and I'll be forever grateful for the relationship and the opportunity, because he was the absolute best. I went on to play for Chuck Daly and John Calipari and others, and I'm just telling you, the guy was light years ahead of everybody. I mean, he was just an absolute basketball genius. And other places I've played, I in timeouts, and coaches got a clipboard out trying to draw up a play, and I mean, nobody could come close to him. I mean, it was everything. He was so organized and disciplined in everything that he did. Just being around him was just a lesson. Just every day being around him was just incredible. Yeah, were there tough times that you didn't want to be there? Sure, but it was all in all, it was so cool to be a part of his program.
Yeah, and I remember you came out of Terre Haute. How highly were you recruited then?
I was just on a show yesterday. I was telling people they didn't have the ranking systems that they, all these different things that they do now. But if they did, I don't know. I might have been 1.5 star guy. I don't know. But not. I wasn't heavily recruited. The schools that I was looking at just prior to my senior year were the leader in the clubhouse was probably Evansville with Jimmy Cruz. That's probably where I would have ended up. Right before the signing period, or right before my senior year started, Wake Forest in Florida showed up a little bit. And, I would have had to go check that out, right? Even though I had built a good relationship with Jim Cruz, I would have had to go, just the opportunity to be in a bigger conference on a bigger stage. I would have visited one of those two schools, and I didn't end up making the trip. Coach Felling convinced Coach Knight to come over and take a look at me one day in Terre Haute, and that was all she wrote. So never made the trip to Wake or to Florida, and I would have done backflips to Bloomington for sure.
And not give credit to Coach Knight, but there's a lot of guys that he didn't show the interest in early on. Yourself, Calbert Chaney, that Ron Felling had to say, dude, look at this guy. He can play, I'm telling you.
No, for sure with Calbert and I, there's a lot of truth to it. And it's kind of funny because we're Coach Knight's first two left-handers that he ever had. Somebody told me that once. Which is, both from kind of the same part of the state. One of my favorite, teammates that I've ever had. But it's absolutely Coach Felling. I know for sure with me, for sure. Without Coach Felling and my high school coach, Pat Rady, I don't get to Bloomington. They both, Coach Rady kept reaching out to, at the end of the summer before my senior year, I was still growing and improving quite a bit. And Coach Rady kept calling Felling and saying, hey, I'm telling you, you got to come back here and see him. He goes, he's changing. He's getting better. And Felling's like, look, I just saw him. I was recruiting Alan Henderson all summer, and he and I were on the same team. So Felling was seeing me a lot because they were always following Allen, and eventually both those guys just convinced Coach to come over and take a look, and he didn't waste a lot of time. I mean, he had me shoot by myself on a basket for about 5 minutes. He had me set up a 3-on-3 game. He watched that for about 10 minutes. And then he wanted me to set up a 5-on-5 game. He watched that for about 3 minutes. And it was most of our good players played on the football team, so it was a pretty ragtag group of guys, most of which weren't going to be on the high school team. He didn't even want to watch that, and he just called me in his office, or to my high school coach's office, and we sat down together for just like 2 minutes. And he said, "Coach Rady tells me you're headed to Wake Forest to visit." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, Wake Forest. He goes, "No, I know they played golf there, but I wasn't aware they played basketball." And I didn't laugh. I was a stiff, right? So I couldn't laugh because I was 17 and I was scared. And he said, and then Coach Ray said, "You're going to go visit the University of Florida, is that right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Florida." And I know they have a football team, but I wasn't aware that.
Oh, we lost Brian, but we'll get him right back here. I was going to tell him the irony is, and I will repeat that when we get him back on. The irony is that Bob Knight's 1960 Wake Forest team, I believe, or Ohio State team, beat Wake Forest to win the national championship. So hopefully we'll get Brian right back on here. There he is. Brian, back with us. Lost you for a second. I was going to say the irony in that, Brian, is that I believe Bob Knight's 1960 Ohio State team that he was a part of, I believe Wake Forest is who they beat for the national championship.
Is that right?
with Billy Packer.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah, so that my story. That was at the end of the day. I spent 2 minutes with him, and he made a couple jokes and invited me over. My dad and I over that weekend went to a football game. We sat down with him in the locker room, literally for 2 minutes, and he just said, "Hey, I don't know why Brian Evans would want to play anywhere other than Indiana University. What do you think of that?" I nodded my head. He says, "Indiana University doesn't want Brian Evans playing anywhere except right here. What do you think about that?" And I nodded my head, and he said, "All right." Shook my hand. He goes, "This is gonna be the hardest goddamn thing you've ever done in your life. Do you understand that?" I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Go have a fun time at the football game." And that was it. Never called my house. Never visited my house. I didn't get invited on an official visit. I never met the team. That was my whole entire recruiting story. One time we were on a trip. I went on a golf trip with him over to Ireland, probably like 06, 07, and Jay Billis was on the trip, and one night at dinner, Jay goes, "Hey, Coach, would you be willing to share the recruiting story of Brian? Would like to hear it." And I was sitting there thinking, I wonder I wonder how he's going to tell this. I wonder if he remembers any of this like I do, because it was the biggest thing that ever happened to me. So I knew every part of it. And I'm thinking, how many kids has he recruited through the years? There's no way he's going to remember recruiting me. And Coach goes, yeah, I'd like to tell that story, Jay. I'm happy to tell that story. You ready? And everybody at the table's kind of leaning into here, and he goes, a half a tank of gas to Terre Haute. There's your goddamn story.
That's great. And then NBA, the thought of the NBA, especially when you were in high school and even when you're getting recruited by Bob Knight, the NBA had to be a pipe dream, I'm assuming.
Well, that was my dream.
Not because you weren't good, not because you weren't good enough, obviously.
Oh, no. I was a 1-star. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm telling you this though. I believed in myself. I thought, hey, maybe, I'm going to have to work my butt off, and I was willing to do it. But I'm telling you, once I was around him, and I just started improving at a rate that, I was way, way behind, say, a guy like Calvert. So he was a junior my redshirt freshman year. I couldn't, I struggled to keep up with him, right? Well, he was one of the best players in the country. And then the following year, I made enough of a leap. So my freshman year of playing, we were really good that year. That's the 93 team. And I was giving him fits in practice. I was on the second unit, but I was closing the gap, I was still a long ways away, but I was on a team going, these guys are going to the league. Eric Anderson had left and gone to the league and wasn't drafted, but made the Knicks roster. And I thought, man, I could get there, and then I'm playing with Allen. I know Allen's going to go playing with Calvert and Graham. You're surrounded by guys like that, and they're leaving every year. One of them goes off to the league. I'm just like, man, I got to just keep making these leaps, and then it's going to be me. It's going to be my turn at some point in time if I keep working. So, and that's how it played out.
What did it take as a player at Indiana to learn to manage the hard times of the way that Coach Knight coached, the way that he approached things, how he did it? Because we know he played mind games because there was kind of a rhyme and reason to everything he did, whether it was right or not. He was doing something for a reason most of the time.
Oh, no, he all the time. So calculated, 100% calculated, everything he was doing. You could call them mind games. Yeah, I don't know. He was all about toughness and discipline. And I'm telling you that, like, for me, and let's be honest. A lot of guys couldn't take it, either left or struggled, to be there and really never got comfortable with it. I know for me, I had a great relationship with him. I feel like I took as much of his wrath as anyone. I think a lot of my teammates during my 5 years would tell you the same thing. I got both barrels all the time. I'll come back to that, but I turned a corner. I know exactly when it took place. If you could just, in my case, I was improving so much. I'm like, hey, this works. So am I really going to fight this? Like, this is working for me. It's not working for everybody. It's definitely working for me. So I wasn't resistant to his stuff. It just didn't bother me. But when I really took ownership, and he'd get so mad at me if I turned the ball over in a certain situation, just get really, really upset. I think once I was like, look, I want this more than he does. He's coaching me hard, but I'm not going to let him want me to be a better player than I want to be myself. And he was just such a genius in basketball. Like, he could tell. He had the read of his team, and the read of the room was just spot on. It's like when I was more upset with myself for making a bad play, or I was pushing myself differently. He knew it. Like, right, he saw it. He knew it. He treated me differently. That doesn't mean he wasn't always on me, but when you take ownership of, your I guess career, or your wanting to improve, he knew it, man. He could see it in my eyes. He could see it in my body language, and he treated me different. He got off me in some of those situations that he used to always be on me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And the loyalty of so many players, which we know that they're absolutely a bad side to Coach Knight. A lot of us have bad sides. His could go further than a lot of people's. And so Zach Osterman was on with us earlier, and he said it best. I'm not here to tell you how to feel about Bob Knight, and neither am I. I didn't play for him. I was around him, but that's about it. I mean, that's about all I could say. But I can't tell anybody how to feel. I know there are things that I know that are way on the good side, some things on the other side, and it is what it is. But the one thing is, he was a genius on that court, and I mean, his genius is ahead of its time in some ways.
Well, I sure think so. I mean, I loved, like I said, I loved every second of it. Went by really fast. It was just such a cool opportunity that he gave to all of us to go play for him. Again, he was honest. The dude, I mean, that's one of the things. He's the most disciplined guy I've ever met. He's the hardest working guy I've ever met, and far and away the most honest. Nobody can take that away from him. He was a very, very honest guy.
Do you think you would have had the same success in college, same success at the NBA level if you had gone to Florida or Wake Forest?
Oh my goodness, I'm I'm positive that I would have never made it. An all conference or that guy made me. Listen, I'm telling you this. There's no way I'm the MVP of the Big Ten. I wouldn't have been the MVP of the ACC or no way. Absolutely no way. There's no way I would have had a pro career had I not played for Coach Knight. No way.
And that says a lot right there. And what did you end up playing? A dozen years in the league?
No, I played 3 in the league and I played 7 overseas.
To a 10-year pro career, which is a long, long time. And businessman as well. Don't forget, a big part of Aurora Specialty Sleep Clinic, along with Bob Knight's first recruit ever from Sellersburg, Steve Green. How's Dr. Green doing?
Dr. Green is doing good, I believe. He isn't practicing in the clinic anymore. He's still part owner of the company. I think he's doing great.
And then, of course, Aurora Specialty Sleep Clinic, located there in Indianapolis at 4745 Statesman Drive, Suite A. For those of you that are having sleep problems, this is a way of dealing with sleep apnea sort of thing without having to wear this sci-fi looking mask.
That's right. I appreciate the plug, Jim. Yeah, we make a custom made mouthpiece that's an alternative to CPAP. So people that have tried the CPAP and couldn't tolerate it, which happens all the time. People come see us. We can help you. If you're snoring and your bed partner's had enough of it, come see us. We can make you this mouthpiece and take care of you. Get rid of the snore.
Well, I was running to grab mine, but I couldn't get there in time. I actually have one to show you. It is unbelievably small and compact. It's like wearing a retainer on the upper and lower in the upper and lower parts of your mouth, basically. So it's like people know Invisalign. It's like Invisalign. It's just it's an upper and lower tray that fits around your teeth. It's simple to wear, and man, they work wonders. Absolutely. Are you going to make it to some Indiana games this year?
I will try to, for sure. I want to get down and see the team. I'm anxious to watch tonight. Actually, I got a bunch of tickets and gave them to my kid. I got my daughter. My oldest is a freshman at Marion, plays volleyball there.
Wow.
So she and some friends are going to come down and get to see Marion play in Assembly Hall, which is pretty cool. I'm excited for her.
That's very cool that your daughter playing division or playing volleyball at Marion, and of course you've got Joby right there. Am I saying that?
Steve Downing. Right?
Steve Downing, rather. I keep saying Joby for some reason. Yeah, Steve Downing, the AD at there, who was also a big part earlier on of Bob Knight's career here at Indiana. But Brian, I can't thank you enough, brother, for taking some minutes out. We'll look forward to seeing you sometime soon, and hopefully maybe doing something before or after some IU games.
Just holler. Always happy to do it with you. Thanks, pal.
You are the best. Brian Evans, former Indiana player. Make sure you look up Aurora, especially Sleep Clinic, ARORA, Aurora. That's it's at 4745 Statesman Drive in Indianapolis. The phone number there, 317-482-7900 for those of you that are having problems sleeping. Appreciate Brian for coming on. But not only Brian, big thanks to Bob Kravitz from bobkravitz.substack.com. He's got a great piece out of his first meeting with Bob Knight, and it's a good one. If the words fuck, ass naked mean anything to you, that's pretty much how he starts his story, which is funny. Also, Zach Osterman from the Indy Star, Rick Bozich from WDRB.com as well. Monday, we're back at it again. Greg Rakestraw will be with us, Don Fisher, Dustin Schutte, and we'll see what else we can get done as well. Help you guys have a great weekend. If you're going to the Indiana game tonight, if you see me, reach out. Don't be afraid to say hi. And then, of course, Indiana football tomorrow against Wisconsin in a must-win game if bowl eligibility is a possibility. Until the next time you see me, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.